A private pilot stopped a black man from boarding his own jet, calling security without hesitation. What happened next changed his entire life. The warm breeze at the Van Nuys airport stirred up a little dust against the tires of a sleek black BMW that pulled up to Hangar 6 just after 8:30 in the morning. Malik arrived right on time, as he always did. He stepped out of the car with a calm demeanor, wearing a navy suede jacket over a sharp black t-shirt and fresh sneakers, sunglasses tucked into his shirt. He looked like a man who had a lot to do but wasn't in a hurry. A young ramp agent gave him a nod of recognition before heading to the back of the hangar. The Gulfstream G280 was parked on the tarmac, its steps extended and engines being prepared. It gleamed in the morning light. Malik walked toward it confidently, knowing this route well, from Los Angeles to Kansas City, where he was meeting with logistics partners. He wasn't interested in small talk. He was mentally running through numbers about reorganizing a department and getting his CTO on board with new hires. Just as he reached the first step, a voice called out from behind him. "Excuse me, sir." Malik turned slightly to see a tall man in aviator sunglasses striding toward him, slender and likely in his mid-50s, dressed in a crisp flight uniform that looked sharp. He seemed annoyed already. "Can I help you with something?" Malik asked, curious but not defensive. The pilot stopped a few feet away, sizing him up. "This plane is booked for a private flight. I need to see some ID and confirmation. We can't allow unauthorized boarding." Malik blinked for a moment, considering the possibility of a joke, but the man's expression was serious. No smile, no confusion, just suspicion. "I own that jet," Malik replied calmly. "I'm the one flying to Missouri this morning." The pilot's eyes narrowed. "Sure, and I'm Elvis." Malik chuckled softly, a laugh that indicated he was weighing whether to escalate the situation or let it go. "You can call dispatch. My name is on the manifest." The pilot crossed his arms. "You expect me to believe you own this jet? Look, I don't care who you claim to be. You're not getting anywhere near this aircraft until someone higher up gives the go-ahead." He pulled a radio from his belt, turned slightly away, and spoke quietly into it, apparently trying to verify Malik's story or disprove it. Malik stood still, his hands relaxed at his sides. No yelling, no bravado, just patience. He had faced situations like this before. Not exactly the same, but similar. Yet this felt different. The pilot turned back to him. "Security will be here in 2 minutes. If you're the owner, I'm sure they'll sort it out. You're going to feel really stupid in 2 minutes," Malik said quietly. The pilot smirked, but not in a good way. "I doubt it." Malik stepped back and pulled out his phone, dialing a contact. 2 rings. "Hey, it's me," he said. "You might want to get someone on the line with your Van Nuys pilot. He's blocking me from boarding. No, he has no idea who I am." There was a brief pause. "Yep, I'll wait." As he ended the call, a small black SUV marked "Security" pulled up behind him. 2 men stepped out, scanning the area, and walked toward the pilot. "First, this guy claims he owns the plane," the pilot said. "Refused to show ID. I didn't want to take any risks." One of the guards looked toward Malik, his brow furrowing for a moment before his posture changed slightly, recognition dawning. "Wait, you're Mr. Malik," he said. Malik nodded. "That's right." The guard turned to the pilot. "Sir, you might want to get in touch with dispatch right away." But what happened next would change everything and reveal a mistake the pilot couldn't undo. The pilot's face stiffened. He glanced at the guard and then back at Malik, trying to process the situation. "Wait, you're who?" the pilot asked, still holding the radio halfway to his mouth. "Malik," he replied calmly. "Malik Johnson." There was a pause, and then the pilot let out a soft, skeptical scoff. "Sure, and what? You're some kind of investor?" The way he said investor was loaded, attempting to fit Malik into a stereotype that made sense to him, as if investor was the closest acceptable reason a man like Malik could be standing there at the steps of a $21 million jet, claiming it was his. "No," Malik said, locking eyes with him. "I own the company." The words hung in the air. The pilot didn't flinch. He just exhaled, weary of whatever game he thought was happening. Meanwhile, the security guard had stepped back already on the radio, his expression shifting. The second guard focused his attention on the pilot now, not Malik. "I'm not showing you ID," Malik continued, "because I don't need to. The company isn't rented. The plane isn't chartered. I own it." The pilot shook his head slowly, but his confidence was clearly wavering. "Listen, I've been in this business for a long time," the pilot muttered, "and I don't take chances when someone shows up without verification. You say you own the company? Fine. But the way you arrived, the way you're dressed, it just doesn't add up." There it was, the outfit, the demeanor, the calmness. Not loud enough, not flashy enough, not what he expected. Malik remained silent for a moment, observing the pilot struggle to frame his stance as procedural rather than personal. "You ever think maybe you can't recognize power when it doesn't look like what you're used to?" Malik asked. The pilot didn't answer. Then Malik's phone buzzed in his hand. He stepped aside slightly and answered it. "Hey," he said. "Yeah, he's still here, I'll wait." He didn't even need to specify who he was talking to. The timing was clear enough. One of the guards cleared his throat and gestured toward the pilot. "You might want to talk to dispatch, sir." Still trying to maintain whatever dignity he had left, the pilot turned and raised his radio again. "Base, this is Captain Stevens at Hangar 6. I've got a man here claiming he's the owner of Johnson Aviation. Name's Malik Johnson, says the plane is his." There was silence for a moment on the other end, and then a voice responded, but too quietly for Malik or the guards to hear. Captain Stevens stiffened. "Yes, sir, I understand." He turned, eyes darting to Malik again, but this time there was something different in his gaze, something more anxious. He lowered the radio, lips pressed tightly together. "Well," he said, clearing his throat, "there must have been a misunderstanding." Malik didn't smile. He didn't say a word. Captain Stevens tried again. "I wasn't informed the owner would be flying today. I didn't think I needed to give anyone a heads up to board my own jet," Malik replied, his tone even yet sharp. The two guards didn't move. Everyone seemed to be waiting for Stevens to say something clever or graceful, but he didn't have it in him. "I was just doing my job," he said, more to the guards than to Malik, trying to stick to protocol. Malik turned to the SUV. "You all set?" he asked the guard closest to him. The man nodded. "All set, sir." Just then, another voice came through the pilot's radio. It was louder this time, and Malik caught the tail end of it. "Stand by. You will be relieved of duty immediately. Do not proceed with this flight." Stephen's eyes widened slightly. He took a step back from the group, staring at the device in his hand as if hoping it had malfunctioned. Malik turned to him. "Now you know." But the truth behind that, quiet ownership and why Malik bought the entire company, ran much deeper. Captain Stevens stood frozen, still gripping the radio like he didn't know whether to throw it or plead with it to say something different. But it had said what it said. Relieved of duty immediately. He glanced back at the jet. His jet, or so he had believed just 10 minutes ago. The same jet he'd flown to Scottsdale, to Phoenix, to Miami, the one he bragged about over drinks at the officers' lounge in Burbank. And now, apparently, the man he had tried to push away from the steps owned it, owned the company, owned him. The radio buzzed again. This time, a new voice came through, lower, calmer, female. "Captain Stevens, please report to terminal office. 2. Do not initiate takeoff. Do not interact with the client further." He didn't even respond, just dropped his hand to his side and stared at the tarmac. Malik took a quiet breath through his nose, not a sigh, not relief, just the kind of breath you take when something you've anticipated still hits differently once it happens. He turned to the guards. "Thanks, I think we're all set here." One of them nodded slightly and walked toward the security vehicle. The other lingered for a moment, watching Stevens slowly head back toward the terminal building, his steps heavy. Malik didn't gloat, he didn't smirk. Instead, he glanced at his watch and then back at the jet. The co-pilot, a younger man with a confused expression, had stepped halfway down the stairs during the commotion. He hadn't said a word so far, but now he gave Malik a nod of acknowledgement, stepping aside to clear the way. "Sorry about that. Mr. Johnson," he said softly. Malik didn't respond immediately. "So, are you flying this today?" "If you want me to, sir, I'm cleared." Malik studied him for a moment, then gave a single nod and went up the stairs without another word. Inside, the jet cabin was cool and elegant, with cream leather seats and walnut trim, exuding quiet sophistication. He dropped his bag on the seat nearest the front and sat down, rolling up one sleeve as he leaned forward to unlock his tablet. The aircraft door closed behind him with a solid thud as the crew began pre-flight checks. Malik leaned back, gazing out the window. He wasn't thinking about Stevens anymore. He was reflecting on why he had bought the company in the first place. It hadn't been out of ego. It hadn't even been for convenience. 2 months ago, he had been on a different private flight, this time as a client, when something similar occurred. Not as dramatic, no security, just a tone in the pilot's voice that made it clear he didn't think Malik belonged there. They arrived in Boston late, and Malik never complained, but when he got home, he poured a glass of scotch and stared at the wall for a long time. Then he picked up the phone. He called his lawyer, a quiet powerhouse out in Walnut Creek, and said, "Find out who owns that air charter company discreetly. I want it within a month." He acquired a controlling stake through a holding firm, changed the leadership, and restructured operations. Not once did he walk into the headquarters. He didn't need them to recognize his face. He just needed to ensure they'd think twice before judging someone by the style of his jeans or the color of his skin. The jet began to taxi. Malik looked up from his screen and stared out at the horizon. The sky was clear and wide open, but before the wheels even left the ground, word of what had happened that morning had already started to spread, and things were about to get very public, very fast. The jet lifted off the runway with a low hum beneath the cabin floor. Malik barely noticed. His mind was already elsewhere. Back 2 months ago, the day it all began to change. It was a Thursday afternoon when he boarded that charter out of Phoenix. He had just finalized a contract renegotiation with a supplier there. He was tired, but it was a good kind of tired, the kind that comes after winning without raising your voice. When he got on the jet, the pilot didn't say much, barely acknowledged him, just a curt, "Welcome aboard," and that was it. Malik didn't mind at first. He wasn't there to make friends. But during the flight, small things added up. Delays in service, a tone of forced politeness, and when they landed, the pilot spoke to his assistant as if she were the client, completely. Ignoring Malik, it wasn't aggressive, just cold. Malik didn't say anything, not then, but he remembered 3 days later, sitting on his back patio in Oakland, a glass of Lagavulin in hand. He made the decision, not a loud one, a quiet one, the kind that shifts mountains without fanfare. He called his lawyer, Maxine Gwen, and said, "I want to own something that makes people rethink how they see success." Maxine didn't blink. She knew him. She'd helped him acquire 2 logistics companies, an entire fiber optic network in Nevada, and a boutique hotel group in Santa Barbara, all without his name ever appearing on the initial filings. "What am I buying this time?" she asked. "An air charter service." She exhaled. "You want to build one?" "No," Malik said. "I want the one I flew with last week." Copy that. 6 weeks later, he had it. Johnson Aviation. Not just one jet, but six. Not just pilots, but an entire operational team. He didn't show up at the office, didn't demand his name be emblazoned on the tail. He wasn't seeking attention, but everyone in the boardroom knew who signed their checks now. And it wasn't just about the incident on that Phoenix flight. That was the spark. The real fire had been simmering for years in boardrooms where he had to repeat his title 3 times before someone stopped assuming he was a guest. In pitch meetings where other executives leaned toward his assistant instead of him. In valet lanes where he was asked if he was picking someone up. He never yelled, never made scenes, but he remembered every face. Buying the charter company wasn't revenge. It was a strategic move, a way to send a message without uttering a word. And now, sitting in that jet, his jet, watching Captain Stevens walk away as if the ground had just shifted beneath him, everything came full circle. Malik wasn't new. Money. He wasn't loud money. He was quiet power, the kind that doesn't need a spotlight because it is the room. He picked up his phone again and texted Maxine. "Jet crew situation handled. Let the ops team know we'll need a new captain. I want someone who sees people, not just resumes." She replied almost instantly. "Got it. I'll take care of it." Malik set the phone down. The co-pilot entered the cabin, briefly asking if he needed anything. Malik shook his head. "Thanks, I'm good." The man nodded and returned to the cockpit. Outside the window, the ground below was a patchwork of gold and green, Central California, somewhere near Modesto. It looked peaceful, but in his mind, Malik was already strategizing 3 moves ahead. This wasn't going to stay private because someone on the tarmac had been quietly filming from behind a fuel truck. By the time Malik landed in Kansas City, the clip had already gone viral. When the wheels touched down in Kansas City, Malik had 15 missed calls, 3 from his assistant, 1 from Maxine, and the rest from numbers he didn't recognize. Likely reporters and opportunists, the type of people who suddenly remember your name when the internet puts you in their timeline. He didn't answer any of them, but the texts kept flooding in. "Dude, you're trending. Is that you in that jet clip? Tell me you put that pilot in his place, man." The comments, you need to see them. He wasn't surprised. Someone was always filming. That's the world now. A moment isn't just something that happens. It's recorded, edited, posted, and dissected in real time. And there it was, a shaky 48-second clip showing Malik standing calmly at the base of the jet stairs while Captain Stevens barked at him. The audio wasn't perfect, but you could catch enough. "Don't care who you say you are, you can't be the owner. Security is on the way." Then the security guard stepping in, the co-pilot looking uneasy, and Malik's voice calm and steady. "You ever think maybe you can't recognize power when it doesn't look like what you're used to?" That line hit the internet like fire on dry grass. It wasn't long before the hashtag started. Malik Johnson net worth, private jet owner fired fast. This is why we buy. Comment sections erupted with applause, debate, and frustration. Some lauded him for his composure. Others shared similar experiences of being underestimated. A few pushed back, questioning whether Stevens had just been doing his job. Malik didn't engage. He never needed the approval of strangers. Instead, he sat in the back of a black SUV heading to his downtown hotel and looked out the window, not at the city, but at his own reflections. You spend your whole life hustling, building, and staying low until your actions speak for you. And even when they do, someone will still try to gauge your worth by how you walk, talk, or dress. He wasn't angry, he was weary, not the kind of tired that sleep fixes, but the kind that settles in your bones after the 1,000th time someone thinks you're the assistant. Back at the hotel, he moved through the lobby without lingering. A few guests glanced up from their phones. One woman mouthed, "That's him," as he passed. He didn't slow down, just headed straight for the elevator, up to the penthouse, and sat down at the long table overlooking the city. He poured a glass of water and finally opened Maxine's message thread. She'd sent a link. He clicked it. A morning news segment, split screen. On one side, the clip of the encounter. On the other, a host saying, "We've just learned that Mr. Malik Johnson is not only the owner of the jet, but the entire charter company. That pilot has reportedly been relieved of duty." They called it an eye-opening incident, one that raises questions about perception, wealth, and implicit bias. Malik watched for a moment, then muted the video. He didn't need an anchor to tell him what he already understood. People only believe what they're accustomed to seeing, and if you don't fit the image in their minds, they'll question the reality in front of them. He stood, phone in hand, and walked out to the balcony. From this height, the city appeared small, the people invisible. He wasn't looking down on anyone, but he was above the noise. But what came next wasn't about noise, it was about clarity and a decision Malik couldn't postpone any longer. Malik didn't sleep much that night. He wasn't troubled by the headlines. They came and went. He wasn't concerned about the company's image either. If anything, Johnson Aviation had gained more free publicity in 12 hours than most. Startup C in a year. No, what kept him awake was the decision he hadn't made yet, whether to make it loud or make it final. He sat alone at the small table in the corner of the suite, sipping black coffee as dawn broke over Kansas City's skyline. His laptop glowed in front of him, a report from HR, a draft of a formal apology from Captain Stevens, a polite plea to reconsider. Stevens had sent it late, probably thinking it would soften the impact. It didn't. The message wasn't apologetic. It was self-serving. "I wasn't informed. I've flown high-level clients for years. This could have been managed differently." Malik read it twice. Not once did the man ask how it felt to be treated like he didn't belong. Not once did he acknowledge what the real issue was, not the procedure, not the paperwork, but the underlying assumption. And that was the part Malik couldn't overlook. He picked up his phone and called Maxine. She answered on the first ring. "Let me guess, you've made your decision?" "Yeah," Malik said. "He's done." "Want me to handle it quietly?" "No." Malik leaned back in his chair. "Not this time." There was a pause on the other end. "You sure?" "Yeah. If this were anyone else, he'd already be gone. I'm not about to teach people that your apology matters more than your assumptions." Maxine didn't argue. She understood. "All right, I'll take care of it." Malik ended the call and stood up, stretching out the stiffness in his shoulders. He wasn't angry. He wasn't vengeful. But keeping Stevens around would mean that what happened didn't matter, that being dismissed on your own property could be brushed aside with the right excuse, and that wasn't going to fly, not in his company. He sent one more message to the operations head. "Effective today, Captain Stevens is permanently removed from duty. Offer him a severance package if HR insists, but we're not retaining him in any capacity." No exclamation mark, no added emotion, just business. He closed the laptop and returned to the window. The city was fully awake now. Cars below, people on sidewalks, morning shows buzzing, everyone talking. But Malik had done what needed to be done. Not to make a point, but to uphold a standard in his world. It wasn't enough to build the table. You had to decide who deserved a seat at it. Stevens had shown he didn't, not because of one mistake, but because when the error was highlighted, he still didn't grasp it. Malik's assistant knocked gently and let herself in. She carried a folder, a tablet, and a paper coffee cup. "Everything okay?" she asked, placing the items on the table. "Yeah," Malik replied. "Handled." She gave him a knowing look, then sat down to review his schedule. But before she began, she glanced up and said, "That video, it really resonated with people. I've never had so many friends text me about my boss." Malik smirked. "You tell them I'm just a guy who likes jets," she laughed. "I told them you're the reason I started dressing better." They both chuckled, and then it was back to business. But what lingered with Malik long after that morning wasn't the decision itself. It was what it revealed about who gets questioned and who gets trusted. Without saying a word, 3 days later, Malik was back in Oakland. The headlines had shifted. A new scandal, a different name, a fresh round of outrage somewhere else. That's how these things go. But the video kept circulating, quietly, persistently. A few million views turned into 15. Clips from the confrontation were woven into podcasts, think pieces, even reaction videos. Some people praised his composure, others dissected it like they always do, debating tone, clothing, delivery. Malik didn't respond to any of it. He never did. But something unusual happened afterward. The emails started coming in, not the usual type, not pitches or partnership proposals. These were personal. One was from a young man in Minneapolis who worked as a baggage handler. He said he saw himself in Malik, how people at the airport always assumed he didn't know much. He wrote that seeing someone like Malik stand firm without yelling made him feel acknowledged. Another came from a woman in Arizona. She ran a small charter service and wrote that her own pilots had made similar assumptions before. She thanked Malik for demonstrating what accountability could look like. There were dozens more like that. No hashtags, no performances, just real people who understood exactly what had happened because it had happened to them too. That's what stayed with Malik, not the video, not the trending tags, but the quiet truth beneath it all. People are tired of being doubted in rooms they built. And for Malik, this wasn't the first room. It wouldn't be the last. But this one mattered because it reminded him of something he'd forgotten. That being underestimated is exhausting, but sometimes it's the sharpest tool in your toolbox. Because while they're busy sizing you up, you're already acquiring the building. Late that evening, he walked through the empty hangar of Johnson Aviation's new facility outside of Oakland. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that lets you hear your own breath. One of the maintenance crews was fixing a tail light. A cleaner waved from across the floor. Malik approached the nearest jet, the one that started it all. He didn't touch it. He just stared at it for a long while. Then he turned and walked out. As he reached the exit, he paused by a bulletin board near the employee lounge. It had birthday notices, maintenance schedules, and a new flyer with the company's updated mission statement. He hadn't written it, but someone had pulled the words from something he said years ago. Respect doesn't come from how loudly you speak. It comes from how you carry the silence. Malik smiled, not broadly, just enough. Outside, the sky was darker now, the air cooler. He unlocked his car, settled into the seat, and drove away without saying a word because the message had already been sent. Sometimes, it's not about proving who you are. It's about standing firm when someone decides you're not enough and letting the truth do the talking. If this story resonated with you, think about those moments when someone tried to measure your worth without knowing your weight. Then do what Malik did. Hold your ground, build your legacy quietly, and let their assumptions cost them instead.